Broad City is known for its humor, its chaos, and absolutely iconic moments like this one.
Do you know them? No. But in DeClerc, we all fam.
As it should be. But I think there is an aspect of the show that is criminally underhyped, and that is the personal growth of the characters and the way that it portrays being in your 20s. So that is what I want to talk about today. I'm Rose Confetti. I've watched Broad City more times than I can count. So we are going to go on a little journey together. We're going to talk about Abbi and Ilana, how they grow over the 5 seasons of the show, and like how that reflects the experience of being in your 20s and growing up. So we're going to look at their careers, their relationships, and just their personalities in general. Before we get too far into it, a quick reminder that this is absolutely just my interpretation of the show. It doesn't reflect what the creators or writers were going for. This is just like how I view it as a fan of the show. And obviously, huge spoiler warnings. This will talk about all 5 seasons of the show. So if you've not seen it, maybe watch it first or, get a taste and then go back and see what we're talking about. Now that's out of the way. Let's get into it. So in 2014, Broad City, the TV show, is released on Comedy Central. I say the TV show because it was a web series first, but I'm going to be talking just within the realm of the TV show. So we meet Abbi and Ilana in 2014. However, thanks to season 4's episode Sliding Doors, I believe it's the first episode in that season, we do get a little insight into what the girls were like in 2011. It's only one episode, so I won't go into it too far, but the things that we find out in this episode are basically that neither of the girls have like any of the confidence, especially Ilana. We see that she straightens her hair every day. We see that she wears clothes that very much cover her up. There's a scene where her clothes get like ripped off and she's horrified, which is so not something that we know Ilana for in the show. So we can see that she's already had some growth between this 2011 flashback and where we meet her in 2014. And then from Abbi's perspective, she just seems like she has no confidence. She doesn't stand up for herself. And although these are still some things we see in the show normally, it's at a much bigger extreme. And also we just get to see how much their lives are improved by having met each other and becoming friends. It's so clear in this flashback that both of them really needed a best friend, someone to uplift them and to really understand them. And that's what we get. I love this episode. I think getting to explore the origin stories of the characters after we've gotten to know them is so sweet. And it's done in a really fun way. So that's where the girls were at in 2011, but where were they in 2014 when we met them? I think the best way to talk about each of the characters is to look at them separately. So let's start with Abbi. She's the character that drives the biggest change in the show by deciding to leave to Boulder, Colorado, which, like, as someone who doesn't live in America, when characters leave and move to different states and different areas, it just like makes no sense to me. I've also spent a significant amount of time trying to Google how long it would take Abbi to get to like Ilana's apartment in New York. Because none of the scale makes sense to me. In Australia, we just get very used to the idea that you're probably going to have to fly if you go interstate, but you can also drive. It's just going to take you a week. Anyway, in season 1, Abbi is 24, turning 25, because at the end of season 1, we see her 25th birthday. Let's start by talking about Abbi's work. So in season 1 through to season 3, Abbi is working at Solstice, the gym. She's a cleaner who's aspiring to be a trainer. But the thing is, Abbi is an artist. That's what she studied. She wants to be an artist. And the way that she gets so wrapped up in the drama of the gym and wanting to be a trainer or wanting to be a cleaner, like that for me is very 20s. Like you've got this big goal that you want to achieve, but you've ended up in this job just to pay bills, and now you're getting caught up in all of that. Like you're wanting to climb the ladder, you're getting distracted by the drama at that workplace, and you're kind of forgetting the bigger dream that you had in the first place. And although obviously being a trainer is probably more appealing to Abbi than being a cleaner, I do think there is this element of like losing track of your bigger goal. Like if she really wanted to, she could clean, come home and do her art, but instead she's spending a lot of her free time wanting to be a trainer. So I think this is a really interesting aspect of Abbi as a character, that although she has these goals, she is stuck thinking about the gym all the time. Like sometimes I just can't help but be like, girl, it doesn't matter. Just do your job, get the money that you need, and then work on your art. Like being a trainer just isn't that important. Although to be fair, it probably does play into Abbi being super competitive. So maybe the gym actually just wasn't a good place for her to work to start with. To her credit though, I think we see personal development in Abbi before she even takes the residency in Boulder. So in season 4, we see that she has a job in some kind of like design agency. And yes, she's an assistant, but up until that moment with her boss's cat, her boss was about to look at her design. So I think that, you know, she's had this moment of being like, I actually just need to find a job that's somehow related to where I want to be. And I think that's on personal growth. And I do think if, that hadn't happened with the cat, she could have had some success in that business. Then we do kind of see her going backwards a little bit by working at Anthropology, but at least she's still pushing. She's still pushing to try to do those window displays. She's trying to put herself out there with Cynthia Erivo, which is like a really weird thing I didn't notice until my most recent rewatch, that Cynthia is her boss. Anyway, so I think we can see coming out of Solstice, she has this like refocus on working somewhere that does contribute to her art. However, by the time we get to season 5, and I think it's no mistake that Abbi turns 30 this season. Like, I know it makes sense chronologically, but it also makes sense character-wise. Like, she hits 30 and she suddenly realizes that she's been doing these jobs that like only inch her towards her art goal. She needs to do something bigger. So, you know, when a TV show ends and you can see that they're trying to find a way to write a character to leave the show, it can feel really prescriptive and sometimes it can feel very out of the norm for that character. But I think this is okay for Abbi. I think this works. I think that her character going from completely distracted at Solstice, not focusing her art, to trying to make it work in New York, taking these jobs where she has some opportunities in art, and then going, you know what, this is taking too long. I actually need to dedicate myself. Like, I like that arc, and I think that happening at 30 is really nice. There can be this thing in TV, especially shows, I think of like The Bold Type, where the girls are so young, so successful, it can feel like you can't make those big changes when you get to 30. Like, it feels like something you have to do at 24, and if you're not successful straight out of university, like, you're going to fail. So I really like seeing Abbi having those realizations when she hits 30. It's, I think, although a lot more chaotic than real life, I think that aspect is relatively realistic. On top of this, I think character-wise and character development-wise, it made sense for Abbi to leave New York. Throughout the show, that New York as a place is kind of a character in itself, and we see lots of situations where Abbi and Ilana, especially Abbi, aren't super into living in New York. Like, I think of when they go to Florida, one of my favorite episodes, it's from season 4. They nearly want to live in Florida until they remember all the terrible things about Florida. And like, they're so disenfranchised by the city. We've got the bed bugs. We've got the rats. We've got the DMV. We've got when they go to the co-op and that's the only time they have fresh produce and then they lose access to it. You know, Abbi is mugged. Like, all of these things, it feels like by the end of 5 years and plus longer, because we assume that she was living there before she met Ilana, she's going to be sick of the city and feel like it's time to move on. And her character does reflect on this in season 5. So like, we kind of know she's feeling that way. But I think we do see the groundwork being done throughout the series. When I was looking at the show through this kind of lens, I found it really interesting that Abbi's character is very much more driven by her career. Her relationships don't have as big of a part of her story as much as it does for Ilana, if that makes sense. But there are 2 relationship moments that I think are really important for Abbi's personal growth. Obviously, we have the relationship with Trey, which I think is really sweet. And I think in the moments where you meet like Abbi's dad and the relationship she has with the Bed Bath & Beyond employees, I reckon Trey fits into that like dorky vibe that she has. He's very wholesome and he treats her really well and he's very like stable and safe. And I do think that they work together in that way. Do I think they should have been together forever? Absolutely not. However, I do think that, you know, she probably could have given him more of a chance. There's that whole episode where Abbi's like, am I a relationship type girl? Am I not? And she has this existential crisis. And so that is a big moment of personal growth. But also, I think the situation with Trey kind of teaches her that there's consequences to her actions. And I think we see her kind of making more specific choices going forward in her dating life. I don't know. I might be reading into this too much, but I do think she learns a lot from being with Trey. And then I love in season 5 when we get to explore Abbi's queerness. And I love that it happens after Abbi is 30. Again, kind of reiterating that idea that you don't have to be in your 20s to still be learning about yourself. And there is a plot line about Abbi's partner thinking that she's being quite childish and needs to grow up a bit. I do think that influences her decision to pursue her art a bit more, but not so much in a direct way. I think it kind of makes her go, oh, I do need to learn about myself more. Like, it makes her stop and reflect on where her life is going. And I like this idea that at 30, Abbi is learning about her queerness and she's rediscovering that she just wants to focus on her art and she's ready to move. So I like this idea that all of that's happening in a year of realizing things, to put it as Kylie Jenner would say. Over on the Ilana side of things, I think there's a lot more focus on her relationships than her career. So let's start with relationships. And I should say she's probably around 21, 22 when the show first starts, because at the end of season 2, she turns 23. Obviously, the biggest relationship that Ilana has on Broad City is with Lincoln, and what a brilliant character to have in the show. Lincoln is probably my favorite other character aside from our two main gals. And what I love about what Lincoln's relationship with Ilana teaches her is how like Ilana's this like cool, free, poly, queer girl who like doesn't seem to want these really deep committed attachments. But when Lincoln does break up with her in season 3, I believe it affects her more than she expects. And I just like this idea that in your 20s, you think you have this idea of what you want and, you know, what you can handle. And then when something happens, when someone does leave your life, it might affect you more than you thought it would. And that kind of like, I think sets her up for understanding that she does have really deep connections with people. And she does clearly grow from this, because in season 5, when they have their eventual second breakup, and this one feels a lot more definitive, I think she kind of like heals from that one a little bit better. She feels more at peace with how that turned out, because she understands herself and she can kind of like respect that the relationship had to end, but she actually got to give it the heart that she wanted to. This is all getting a bit deep, but I just think that she wouldn't have expected to be heartbroken by Lincoln in that way. And I think that that's something that a lot of people experience in their 20s. You kind of think you can handle certain types of relationships, but maybe you can't. That's not to say she can't be poly. I think she can. I just don't think that she fully appreciated the impact that Lincoln had on her life and how much she cared for him until he was gone. We also see a relationship growth moment all wrapped up in one episode in season 2 in Coat Check, where Ilana dates that girl, well, I should say meets up with that girl who is so much like her, and she has this moment of realizing that she dates people who are different than her, not the same. And so I think that that is a little moment of personal growth that we're going to count. Career-wise, sometimes it can feel like Ilana is just there to uplift Abbi. So we see all those years where she's working at Deals, and like she just really doesn't care. Like it's aspirational, the level of care that she has. Although we do see her wanting to be a woman in business, I think is how she puts it on the show. She wants to be a woman in business. And it's not until season 3 that we see her do anything that she seems to really care about, which is when she accidentally volunteers because she thinks she's working for the Hillary Clinton campaign. In season 4, she works for RuPaul at Sushi Mambo, which like works for her because she gets lots of money, but it doesn't inspire her. Like, it's not something that she is passionate about. Like, sometimes it can just feel like Ilana is a little bit aimless. But we do see her entrepreneurship grow across the seasons. I'm trying to think of all the different things that we see her work on. Like, she's got her period pants. Phone wigs obviously are a big one. There's a moment where it like turns out she accidentally invented Instagram. And of course she does run She Work for a hot minute there as well. So we get these moments across the seasons of Ilana being a bit of an entrepreneur. She clearly has ideas and she clearly has drive if she actually like puts herself to it. For me, in season 5, when Ilana decides to go back to university to do psychology, on one hand, it feels a little bit out of the blue because going back to academia wasn't something that her character expressed previously, whereas her businesses were a much more like prevalent part of her character. However, like it works, right? Like she clearly has such an interest in people, figuring out why people are different, how they're the same, bringing people together, helping people. And there's this whole narrative around her mental health throughout the show. So like it does make sense. Plus we know she already did an undergrad. So we know that she like has been in the university environment before. So all in all, it doesn't make me mad. And I like to picture her entrepreneurship combined with this kind of like post-grad psychology thing could come together where she has her own business one day. Like that all works for me as a character, and I think does work with her character growth. I mentioned mental health just before, and I want to talk about that for a minute because I like the way that mental health is portrayed through Ilana's character across the whole show. At the end of season 2, we see Ilana's birthday, and Abbi has this thing where she says, what's something you're proud of and what do you want to do next year? This kind of like birthday reflections thing. And Ilana does say that she would like to lower her dosage of her medication. And this isn't the only time we hear reference to her medication. When they're packing to go on holidays, I'm pretty sure Abbi says something about, have you packed your anti-anxiety medication? Have you packed your antidepressants? So we know that Ilana does struggle with her mental health. And I like that it's sprinkled in there without being too big of a deal. On the flip side though, when it is a big deal, is in season 4 when we have the episode with Abbi's mum, and Ilana's struggling with seasonal affective disorder, if that's even what she was struggling with. She might have just been struggling with her depression at the time, and she kind of has this realization that maybe she's going to have to take medication for a while, and that's okay. And she doesn't have to fix everything all at once. There's no pressure on her to be on any kind of timeline. Like, so long as she's feeling okay, that's the most important thing. And I really enjoy this character development from thinking she has to reduce her medication to realizing that she doesn't have to. And you see that chart across the seasons, which I think is really like well done and quite subtle for the characters. Obviously, until the season 4 episode, that's a lot more obvious of a discussion of her mental health, but it's like sprinkled out throughout the show, which I do quite like. And then I guess for the end of season 5, for Ilana to go and study psychology, like that makes sense. She has experience with struggling with her mental health. She's also freakishly fascinated by other people. So I think it does work at the end of the day. All in all, this show for me is obviously so funny and such a great watch. But if you look beyond that, it's also a great commentary on your 20s. Like, as a viewer, yes, your life probably isn't as chaotic and exciting as Abbi and Ilana's, but there are moments and themes that do relate to how you feel in your 20s. And as much as I wish there were many more seasons of the show, for it to be the 5 years from 25 to 30, particularly for Abbi, I think is a really neat amount of episodes and like a nice neat pocket of their lives that you got to witness. And, you know, in the last episode, they have that scene where it pulls away and you see lots of best friends all in different moments of their lives. It does make it feel like the show encapsulates that 5 years that were really fundamental for both Abbi and Ilana. Now that it has been, 6 years since the show finished, I would love to see a Broad City reboot. I want to know how they're dealing with their 30s. Like, as much as the Gilmore Girls reunion was very underwhelming in many ways, I wouldn't even mind if it was a year in the life, but like done better, because I want to know how they're navigating their 30s. For me, I feel like Ilana has some kind of business where it's her own practice. She's a psychologist, or maybe she's doing counseling or advising in some way. I hope that she's living alone and maybe comfortable not having a housemate. Like, maybe she feels a bit more like she could be her own best friend. And then Abbi, I feel like, doesn't live in New York at the moment, but maybe only lives a few hours train ride away, so it's not as far. And maybe she's married to a lovely woman and she teaches but also like sells her own art, and that's very successful, and she's got a studio, like, and they visit each other on the weekends. Like, I would love to see this. And so yeah, I just would really love to see how they're navigating their 30s, and I don't mind waiting a little bit longer. We could maybe see their 35 to 40. Would love to see that. Anyway, that's just my fantasy. I don't think it would ever happen, but it's nice to dream. I would love to know what you think of Broad City. Do you agree with me that the characters did have personal growth, even though on the surface it's just a silly comedy? What did you think of how the show ended? Where do you think Abbi and Ilana would be now? Let me know in the comments. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the show, so I love talking to other people who are fans. And before you go, please like this video and subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this video. I'm obviously still a very new creator, so any support is greatly appreciated. I'll be back soon with another video. I'll catch you later.